For 1995, and we are here in Delano, Minnesota, almost Wisconsin. And we're talking to Barbara Mielke about her family life and life as a child and her relatives and things. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born and when.
I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the old Asbury Hospital by Elliott Park in 1920 in a snowstorm.
Did your mother have a hard time getting to the hospital on time?
I think they got me there on time, but my dad couldn't come back to be there when I was born, I was told, because it was snowing so bad he couldn't get through. I don't imagine he had a car. I can't remember that because of course I wasn't even there.
What car was it you were touring when you were brand new? Great-grandmother?
Oh, that was probably their car. My dad might have had a company car.
Where was he working at?
Northern Fire Apparatus. They made fire equipment.
Is that where he was working when he went to Africa?
Mm-hmm. Traveled.
That's why he met Grandma in Colorado.
He met her on his way back from one of his trips. He met her.
Where?
In, where was it, Berthoud, Greeley. And my mother was working in a hotel, waiting on tables and doing the laundry. She was 15 years old when he met her, and I don't know if they must have been married in Loveland. And then they came back to Minnesota, to a strange country.
What color was her hair when she left Colorado?
She was a towhead.
And what color did it turn when she got to Minnesota?
Reddish brown. She was a towhead all her life. And then her hair changed.
How old was she when she had you?
20.
How did she find out how to finally get pregnant?
Scrubbing floors on her hands and knees.
It worked.
Mm-hmm. Old Mrs. Penrith. She
that?
said to that was a lady that owned the house where they lived, and she said,
what address was that?
3440 Pillsbury Avenue South. And she said to my mother, if you want to have children, you better get down on your hands and knees and scrub your floor, stretch and scrub your floor. And right after that, my mother got pregnant.
Where did you move to after that?
Just down the block.
What was that address?
I don't remember.
We do have that written down, so.
Yeah, old Grandpa Ryder's house.
Can you describe the house?
No, it was an old. All I can remember that there's pictures of us, a screen porch that he'd let us run back and forth on. I was allowed to run back and forth. I guess he loved me. And when my mother would bathe me, he would drop a string down from the back part of the house, and it would drop down by our bathroom window, and it would have pieces of gum or candy on it. And he lived to be quite old.
Is that where you lived when you went to see this shooting of the gangsters?
No. I was older then. I lived on between First Avenue and Stevens Avenue on 37th Street when we went to a fire. No, we lived on 37th Street between First Avenue and Stevens when I went to the mill fires. But when we went to see that Dillinger's thing, we lived on 34th Avenue, between 33rd and 34th Avenue and 29th Street.
What was the address of Grandpa Smith's address? Great-grandma and grandma. Your grandma.
3221 2nd Avenue South.
Tell us about that house.
That was a beautiful old house that had beautiful old woodwork in it. It was 2-story, but the attic part of it was as big as these rooms here, and they were used for storage. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms and a big bath, which you got scared your life out of because they had frogs and bulldogs by the doors. And they had a pantry, butler's pantry, and there was a stairway, a maid's stairway that went up through the back and came down. The house had a big screen porch on the front, and then you came into a little entryway and then into a vestibule, which the stairway going upstairs was right off of that. And then as you came in, to the right of it was the living room, which I can't ever remember anybody ever sitting in there because the furniture was always covered with sheets to keep it clean. You walk through to the dining room or from the living room into a music room, which had a big marble fireplace. There was a love seat and chairs, piano in there. We used to sit in there, and my grandfather played either the banjo or the mandolin, and my grandmother played the other. My aunts played the piano, and that's where we did our singing. There were no card playing in the house. We weren't allowed to play cards. They would play backgammon, or what's that other one with the dots on the dominoes. And there was a big walk-in closet or cloak area where they had benches on either side and where the clothes were always hung. And then into the dining room where the big, huge claw-like leg round table, oak table, was always set. And in the center was always the condiments, oils, vinegars, salt and pepper, sugar, always set there with the netting over the top of it, so it was always ready.
And who served the food?
My grandmother. After my grandfather died, she was the head of the house, and she cut and served all the meat and
Was she
food.
doing
Us
plates
kids,
too?
the plates were always warmed on the radiator, and the grandchildren were always fed first. And we were allowed to only answer what we were asked. We were never allowed to talk at the table. But I enjoyed being there. She had I always called it a balcony up over her cupboard in the dining room, and that had a big plate rail around the room and all the beautiful plates and that she had up on that. And you went into, and there was a pantry, and then you went back past the kitchen. The kitchen had a wood stove and a gas stove in it. There was no refrigerator in those days. So there was an ice box out on the back porch, and then they had a walk-in cooler like a butcher's cooler. And they'd bring in huge cakes of ice from the backside into the cooler room. And then where the stairway went up to from where the maids would go up or down into the basement, there was doors that opened up there, and the meat was cut. The meat, the sides of beef were hanging, or pork, or whatever kind of meat it was hanging in the cooler, and they just cut off what they needed at a time. And then they would pick it out through that door that came out through that hallway going to either upstairs or down the basement. And Grandma always made her own soap. And there were always jingle bells, sleigh bells that hung down by the furnace room or where she fixed her soap, made her soap. But all the grease in that was saved, and she would stir up her soap periodically, so they had plenty of soap for their laundry and cleaning purposes. Any old beggar that came down the street or up the alley, she'd lift her skirts, and then every layer she had a pocket for the sheenie, a pocket for the Iceman, a pocket for whoever came along, and there was always a pocket for us grandkids. So we'd get a penny. Did you hear that? Only a penny, and we thought it was a lot. And she had beautiful gardens, but today you'd cry if you'd see it, because it's a total shambles.
How long did they live there?
Till my grandmother died. Judy was, about 5 years old? So she's been dead about 50 years. I never saw she would talk about collecting. She had everything she wanted. I mean, there wasn't much she didn't need. And so in one corner of her bedroom were stacks of boxes that either hosiery was in or handkerchiefs, and they always put money with it. So when she died, everything crumbled but the money. And we could braid, take her down her hair. Her hair was, she loved to let us brush her hair. Yeah. Her hair hung clear down below her buttocks. And it was always in a pug braided and then put up in the pug on the back and top of her head. And we kids, my cousins and I would sit there and pull that hair down and all the hairpins out of it and brush her hair. She loved to have that done. But she would, you look back and you think she probably wasn't that old, but we thought she was really old.
I know she was always crabby.
She was stern.
And I suppose that's where I got
Yeah,
crabby.
we weren't allowed to do any running through the house. More than once that we'd run up the back stairway and through and down the front stairway. We'd try to take the front stairway and run up and across the rooms and back down the back stairway. And she'd take her cane and she'd push it on the ceiling and she'd say, "You're shaking the chandeliers." And then we'd have to stop. We always had Easter egg hunts there. My aunts would hide the Easter eggs out in the gardens and up in the stairways and the rooms, and we had to go around and search for them. And you never knew where you were going to find them. And Grandma always, our doll clothes and that, she always knitted something for our dolls. We never had a lot, but she'd always make something for our dolls every Christmas. And the Christmas tree was in that vestibule because it was an open stairway, and that tree would go up so that the point of it would go up into the opening. And when family was there, we were all seated at the same time. There was nobody ever left out at that table.
Tell us about the neighborhood you grew up in.
Well, when I was probably like Annie's age, 8, 9 years old, I lived on 45th and 1st Avenue. I ran away from home one time and ran to Lake Harriet with my friend. And my dad came after me. They were getting ready to go to a party, and they came after me. Somebody told them where they thought we had gone, to Lake Harriet, which was a long ways off for little kids to go. And he came over and he got us, and Ruby, my mother must have taken her home in the car, and my dad used a willow switch on me all the way back. And then I was put to bed without supper. And it was just an ordinary neighborhood. Although when we'd have heavy rains, the sewers would, or the water, wherever the water went down, it would flood. It would be like a lake, and people would get out there in boats and boat around. And it was real bad. It would shoot the manholes right up in the air. Our basement would fill up, and the first thing when we knew a storm was coming, old Barbara, she'd run down the basement, grab the rags or towels or whatever and stuff in the sewer drain so that the water wouldn't come up. More than once our water was up to our windows because it would back up so terrible. And now they have control of that. And I went to Rosedale School. Oh, I'll have to tell you about the time I went. Rosedale Hospital was out there, and I had to go to the dentist. My mother, that's when we lived on 41st and 1st Avenue. And my mother walked us down the alley. The hospital was at the end of the alley, and they had a dental office in there. And my mother walked me down the alley and into the dental office, and I got in the chair, and the doctor turned around to get the drill to check my teeth and drill my teeth, and I, out of the chair, knocked over something. out of the door, down the steps, and around the building and up the alley. And my mother grabbed me by the back of the neck and marched me right back down there again. I had no choice. And let's see. I wasn't a perfect kid. I was trickish.
Did you swim?
Not very much.
Aunt Betty swim?
Aunt Betty swam. She was a good swimmer. I was a little bit afraid of the water. But I was in plays at school. Played Dopey and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And well, I have to tell you about the time I wanted. In those days, you couldn't eat your lunch at school unless there was something sad going on or somebody was sick or somebody had to go someplace special, and then you had to bring a note, or you were supposed to bring a note from home allowing you to eat your lunch in school or bring a lunch to school. Anyway, I told the teacher I had to eat my lunch in school, and she wanted to know why, and I said because my mother had her kidneys taken out. And about 2 weeks later, the teacher saw my mother and she said, "Oh, Mrs. Smith, are you feeling better? I heard you had your kidneys taken." She didn't, but the poor thing, she lost her kidneys late in life, so maybe that was my punishment. But I took dancing lessons. Nylons, we didn't have nylons.
Those brown stockings.
We had Lyle stockings, long underwear, no slacks, no snowsuits. My mother would get that long underwear on and those stockings so there wasn't a ridge in them. And I'd get out behind the garage and I'd roll the stockings down and roll the long underwear up, and then I'd go to school. And then I'd spend all day in school, and then on the way home I'd stop behind the garage and I'd roll my stockings down and roll my underwear down, and then I'd roll my stockings back up and I'd walk in the house and my mother would say, "You've had your long underwear up again." "No, Mother, I didn't." "Yes, you did." They were just lumps all over my legs. And I had to take my dad's, during Depression years, my mother would fix a 2-pound butter jar, stone jar, and she'd lay his hot food in there in layers with, I don't know what she put between them, and then she'd wrap it up in bags or paper, newspaper probably, and then in a bag. And then she'd put me on the streetcar to go downtown to take his lunch to him or his dinner to him.
How was he working there?
13th and LaSalle, the an oil station. And then I was supposed to he trusted me, so he'd pin the receipts of the day or from the day before inside my clothes. And I would walk from there to the Northwestern Bank downtown on, that was probably like on about 7th or 8th and Marquette in there somewhere. And then I'd go up a stairway up onto the 2nd floor, and the man would take me behind the counter, and then somebody'd come and unpin all this bag of money out from underneath my clothes and then send me back down to that. But I usually went to the Minnesota Theater. Got a chance to go to the show once in a while. And I'd sit way up in the balcony and watch the shows. And then at a certain time I had to be back to the station to go home with my dad.
When did you meet your husband?
When we lived on 29th Street between 33rd and 34th Avenue, and I was, 13 years old, 14 years old. We were all neighborhood kids together.
Did you ever go out with anybody else?
Oh, we went as neighborhood kids. We always had family parties. One parent would have a party one weekend, and then next weekend and another family would have it. And
You never really dated anyone else?
no,
Tell us about romantic fever.
well, I was 13 years old, And I got sick after walking to my aunt and uncle's on a December day, and it was rainy and cold, and I got wet and cold, and after that, then I got sick. And I had to finally go into the hospital, and I was in the hospital a couple months. And then I was out of school for almost a year. Oh. And so I lost a year of school. So I lost graduating with the kids that I knew, which was hard. But it worked out. Never had a bicycle, and then I borrowed one from somebody and went up the hill, got up to your dad's house, and his mother called my mother and snitched on me that I was on a bicycle, that I wasn't supposed to be on a bicycle because it was hard on my heart. But I proved them wrong.
And how about the Mississippi River and the bridge?
The cherry pies.
Yeah. The boys always went across the railroad bridge by Brackett Field, Brackett Park. And so us girls decided we were going to go to the, they always went over the river on the railroad bridge on the trestles under below it. What they call those was two boards with space between them. They would walk across. Well, Dorothy and I, we were afraid to walk, so we wanted to get pies too at Paramount Pie Company across the river. So the boys had gone, so we waited a while, and then we got down on our hands and knees, and we crawled on our hands and knees. And we got out in the middle, and we couldn't go any farther. It was, the water was like it was boiling down there. So we backed up. Came back instead of keeping going, because we could have gone over there just as easy, and then we had to walk clear back to Lake Street in order to get back across the river. So we just backed up and got off the bridge, and we never did get our pies. But you used to be able to buy them for what, a nickel or 3 cents a piece over there, and we thought that was really great. But we did a lot of ice skating, and that's where Grandpa proposed to me. Many, many moons ago. He says,
I'll love you till I have to put this arm around you this side, and then put this arm around you this side.
and he pretty near had to do that, didn't he?
Right.
Because Grandma got fat. I was skinny in those days.
You were quite the gymnast, if
I took acrobatics. And Grandpa, that's why he said he met me. He never did see what my face looked like. All he did was see my feet. Because I was doing walkovers or back bends or walking on my hands down the sidewalk. And during fair time, I worked at the state fair. And I peeled onions and potatoes for hamburgers, the onions for the hamburgers and the potatoes for French fries. I don't know how they even French fried them in those days. They were a form of French fry. And then I'd work from 5, I'd go over there at 5 in the morning, and I wouldn't get home until after all the workers had cleaned up where the acts were at night. And when they finally got fed, then Grandpa would come and pick me up so I wouldn't have to bus back home. And we got $10 a week. It was big pay, boy. And Grandma took care of a little baby next door to earn money. And she had brain surgery right after she was born, and the mother let me take care of her, and I canned for her and did their washing and ironing and cooking and took care of that little baby, and I was only about 15, 16 years old. Do you think you could do that? Huh?
I don't know.
That was the only money Grandma had. It was Depression years.
What kind of book reports did you write in school?
Not any more than I had to.
Who read the books?
Dad. Zane Gray. And then I get fail on the book report.
No girl ever reads a book like that.
And Grandma had to take Latin in school because Grandpa said you had to have Latin in order to survive. And all I know is ego amo tu. I love you. Can you say that?
Ego Mama too.
Yeah.
Ego Mama too.
Yeah, I love you. And what is the other one I always say? Navigo, navigarwe, navigo, navigarwe. Anyway, to navigate. What is that? Huh?
Ears.
Up the elf's ears. Okay. So now what?
Tell us
No.
about your sister.
My sister,
She was born, how old were you when she was born?
21 months. And she's a little, well, we didn't get along very good. Till it was too late in life. Because I had to do the work and she'd get the credit for it. So Grandma would go to the store and she would be sent to the store to get the stuff at the store and she'd buy the wrong things, so then Grandma had to take it back. And then I'd get myself a bag of oranges or a bag of apples and I'd come home and I'd hide them. And then all of a sudden I'd be eating an apple or an orange and she'd say, "Where did you get that orange or that apple?" And I said, "I don't have any oranges or apples." "Yes, you do. I saw you eating it." And your Grandma had them hid, so she wouldn't get any. And but she was a good singer. She was a beautiful artist.
She acted too, didn't she?
Mm-hmm. She was a good actress. She was smart, very smart.
She was
Ambidextrous.
left-handed, right-handed, she could be.
She was left-handed. She was born left-handed, and the teachers told her she had to write right-handed, so she had to learn to write both. But when she did her drawings, her artwork, it was always done with her left hand, and so her penmanship wasn't that great. And it was just because she was forced to. But she had a lot of talent.
Tell us about your dad. What was he like?
Oh, he was an ornery cuss. He had a bad disposition. He was a good dad. I mean, he provided well for us, but he was very jealous of my mother, and when he smiled, you knew he was unhappy with things, and then you better get out of his way.
During the Depression, he didn't work. What type of work did he do during the Depression?
During Depression years, he worked for the WPA on geodetic survey, Army engineers,
CCC camps, right?
CCC camps, yeah.
What different places
And
did he
then-
work for in the state? Do you know some places?
Geodetic survey up
Okay,
at
where?
Cass Lake. He was up at Cass Lake, Red River Valley.
Fort Ridgely.
Fort Ripley. No, Ridgely.
Did the Duluth Airport?
Yeah.
That was in later years.
No,
was in
but
the
that-
50s.
Yeah, but it was still had to do with WPA things.
But that was when I was a young kid when he was.
Yeah. He had enough education, but there just was never any work, during those years.
That curly hair that you kept short.
He cut it off so it was about an inch long. He had natural curls. As a little kid, he had long blonde curls that my grandmother put up in rags, and they would hang down his back, and he had little velvet suits with pongee with ruffling around the collars and the cuffs, and the